you know, there's, and again, another saying, but there's only so much we know. There's only so much we don't know. And
Yep.
there's a whole world we don't know that we don't know.
Yep.
Okay? So, you know, when we're taking our, you know, electives around kind of 14, 15, and we're picking subjects and topics, we're already thinking at that point about, you know, university and what we might want to do. But we're working with such a limited amount of information, and we're often working with the information that's surrounding us. So what our parents do, our aunties, uncles, if we've got older brothers and sisters. And so I think this is where people can get kind of trapped in the wrong career paths, or not really reach their potential because there's things out there that they just don't know that they don't know.
Yep. I did
and
this.
So
yep.
kind of being able to share this. Me and my brother actually both suffer dyslexia. So at school, you know, back in the day, that was seen as, you know, you're not very clever, because pen to paper we perhaps weren't, but it doesn't mean in here, you know, we're not very clever. So again, you put in these boxes of this is all you can do. And so we're often limited by, you know, and again, another saying I have our careers are limited by what we let ourselves believe is possible. Now, often those limiting beliefs have come from teachers and from parents.
Yep, unfortunately.
Yes. And
the one closer to us.
Yeah. So at an early age of 10, 11, 12, you know, if we're being told we're not good enough, and maybe we're just not good in that subject, maybe the education system just didn't work for us or whatever, we're then going down a career path that's potentially not right for us, and we could do much better. And it goes back to, you know, really helping people be the best versions of themselves. You know, when we can actually question some of these things, question our career path, maybe we're in a job, and I've worked with some people that are amazing, you know, guys, senior in investment banks, on paper look amazing, but they are so unhappy because it's not aligned with who they are, but they did it because their parents, their dad did it.
Wow.
I tried to do my writing in the morning, so I tried to have at least 2-3 hours in the morning without calls where I can focus on writing.
Okay.
I tried to talk to people later in the day, so after 3 p.m. ideally, after 4 p.m. if I can pull it off, and then every morning also I do yoga, and every evening I walk, and I'm in New York City right now, but a lot of the time I'm in the countryside. And so for an hour a day, I go and walk in the trees, and I don't have my phone, and there's beautiful birds and animals. And even if I've been stuck all day, I will often go for a walk in the evening, and then I will have good ideas. So I think my conclusion is it's not necessarily all about the time, putting 12 hours a day at the computer or 12 hours a day of reading, or it's not necessarily about the time you put in. I think you need to manage your energy, and I think it's very important to have some time in nature and time to think.
Wow.
I hope I can help with this. That's a very interesting question. Because it's unconscious.
Yes.
So that is really interesting. I would share one thing that occurred to me while you were talking, is that if something scares me, I pay more attention to it, and I usually do it anyway, and I challenge myself to do it anyway. And for example, public speaking is not a natural thing to do. Most people would tell you. And so I made myself do it starting, I don't know, 25 years ago. You know, when I was starting out, I would volunteer, and I would just say, just get up there, you know, and it wasn't easy. And I'm sure I was terrible the first few times. But, you know, you get better, and you ask for feedback, whether you fight your instinct not to want to hear it, and and you look at people who are great and you're like, oh, what are they doing? Like, what's so good about what they're doing right now? And then you get better and you're like, oh, and just pick one thing. Like maybe it's their eye contact, maybe it's how they're holding their body, maybe it's, you know, their topic, or maybe they're a little bit funnier, they smile more, or they, you know, so you can learn so much from so many different people. So that's one thing. It's just, I think it keeps life exciting, and it means you're learning if you go towards things that are healthy, but that give you a little bit of like, oh, I don't know if I can do that, but that keeps you young, and I think it keeps you learning. And then you can always, and asking for help from people who are better than you. That's a great way to learn. And people love being asked. It's very flattering. You know, it's a very nice thing to do, actually, for someone, is to say, you do this so well, I'd really like to get better at that. How do you do it? You know, and that's a fun way to bond and to learn. So those are some things that I do.
You know, it's first giving myself my moment of quiet and scheduling it, because it is hard, you know, with the busyness of our life. But process my thinking, I first think about, okay, what did I have planned? What was in my plan? And what did I actually do? You know, from that. But so I look at that first to give myself a sense and a real honest look of, you know, am I getting closer to what I want to achieve? And then I look beyond me, and to think and say, what am I seeing in others, or seeing in the organization I'm in, or the organizations I support, that I need to be, you know, adjusting, you know, what I need to do, the services I offer, how I guide others. I put myself in the place of the people I serve. And so I think about what it is that they're dealing with and what is most important in their mind. And I process that in a way to say, how does this change what I'm going to be set up to do now?
Wow.
And so I look inward. Yeah, I start there because I just need to get that out. That's me. I just, you know, like I said, what did I set out to do, and how did I get, you know, how I progress in that way? But then I focus on the people I serve. What are they set out to do? And how am I helping them achieve it? Am I focused on the right things? So there's the two components, is the way I process: inward, outward thinking, to then give me the sense of, I then go back to what I envision for myself. Yeah, I'll look at strategy, I'll look at plans, certainly, but am I doing what is in the interest of what I envision?
That's a good question, isn't it? Let me just ponder that for a moment. I'm going to be cheeky, and I'm going to pull from two. So I think it's, you know, if I could only pick one, I'd say it's being the coach. Being the coach. But again, if I was going to zero down a little bit more into detail, I'd say it's the presence and connecting. You know, when your leader meets with you, do you feel seen? Like, do you feel seen and heard for the whole person that you are? Like, not just, you know, oh, you're the project manager, or you're the, you know, technical expert on X, Y, Z. Are you seen as all of what you bring, you know, and beyond work? Like, you know, you obviously you have a family and connections and interests, and are you fully seen? And if your leader is not present to you, none of the other good stuff can happen. So I think it's about connecting, being present, seeing the person, and also, as you said, imagining what they can be, even if they can't see it yet.
They can't see
and then guiding, nurturing, supporting, challenging, encouraging them to become their best. So I've managed to sneak a few extra ones in there too. But yeah, it's the coaching and connecting. I think it's the gateway. You know, Barack Obama said reading is a gateway skill. Like, you know, reading opens the door to all of these other things, you know, you're learning. And I think for me, the coaching and presence opens the door to all the other leadership aspects. You know, if you don't connect and you don't coach, the rest is just not going to be that good.
So breath is a really important word to me. When I was at a really low point in my life, I actually looked over on the wall and I saw a poem and it had the word breath in it. And I thought, you could take everything from me, but you can't take my breath. That's mine. And I actually got it tattooed on me. That was in 2015. So fast forward to 2020, where I'm figuring out who I am and my truth and what I'm supposed to be doing in this life. And I'm working with someone who I no longer work with, but we did a lot of work together. And we are like, that word needs to be an acronym. So we think of breath as an acronym. B is for begin where you are. R is reclaim your power. E is excavate core values. A is allow. T is through. And H is heal. And it takes you, we created a 6-month curriculum to take people from their begin all the way to their healing spot, where they can sort of come into their wholeness, their personal freedom aligned with their core values and who they really are and their authentic selves, and therefore make more impact as leaders. Excavating core values, I think, is super, they're all really, really important, but excavating core values is really, that's the one that I'll probably point out to you, is because most people don't really know the core values that they're based on, that they live their life based on. Some people don't even have any idea what that means. And I didn't. And I remember looking through a long list of core values and thinking, you know, this one, that one. Okay, but freedom, why would anybody pick freedom? What does that even mean? I remember thinking that, like, laughing, like, what does that even mean? And then I realized after excavating and doing a deep dive into myself that freedom is my overarching core value. It's the one that's threaded throughout all of the other ones. So my core values and my company's core values are love, freedom, perseverance, trust, and truth. But freedom is the one that's threaded and woven throughout all of the other ones. If I don't have my freedom to be me, authentically me, then I don't have anything. So that's what I help people do, uncover what their values are, what they're basing their life on, and therefore who they really are. Figuring out who these people, these professionals really are. They're not just their title. They're not just a mom or a dad. They're not just anything. They're a lot of different things. And people just don't realize how much makes them up and what values they're basing their life on. And when you can figure out your values and align with them, you can do it. Because then you're walking around and you're authentically you.
I think I first had to see that analyzation wasn't insight. Analyzing and ruminating wasn't aha moments and out of the blue ideas. That those moments came from somewhere else. Now, my analytical brain, my intellectual thinking, I love that part of me, and it's valuable for all leaders and for all of us as human beings. But we have a whole nother resource available to us that I don't know we've thought much about. And that resource is that kind of inner well of being, that essence where those out of the blue ideas come, where we can be driving and you know, have a fresh idea come to us that we're all excited about. And so when I saw that shifts of consciousness, shifts of understanding, new insight, it's a vertical lane, right? It's something changing inside. And then there's all my data compiling and my analyzation and my looking and observing, and that's more horizontal. See, I somehow thought that if I had it enough, if I thought about it enough, somehow it would lead to something. And I realized, like, oh yeah, no, it's a different channel. And then how do we access that channel is what you and I have said. Freer, more spacious. So what am I doing to take things off my mind? What am I doing to come more into the present moment? What am I doing to create space in my day and my schedule and my life? Because there is a relationship between that spaciousness and the quality ideas we get and the quality thinking. And so that do I know the difference inside of me? And once I started to get my own nuanced feeling of, oh yeah, there's this deeper channel, this like other channel with creative thinking and well-being and more perspective. And then there's my mind, which has a ton of good data and information and analysis and rumination. But if I had to, if like this is impossible, right? But I would say prior to getting more curious about where creativity comes from, where new ideas and connection lives in us, I was living my life here. I was living my life in the intellectual and the processing and and I loved it. It was fun and interesting and fascinating. But when I started to open myself up to this other place in us that has kind of different quality of life and feeling and thinking, that's when my ideas, my well-being, my ability to connect to people in a more impactful way, that was the game changer. Not getting better this.
Probably the number one thing is relationships. Relationship building. As I said before, every promotion, every new job came from a referral. So that's the key. Creating visibility for yourself, which is, you could say is advocating for yourself, but creating a visibility plan so that you don't, you're on people's radar at all times. So whatever that looks like, in your organization, figure that out. And I think the last one is paying attention.
Paying attention. What is that? I'm curious. Paying attention?
Paying attention means what's going on around you. How are decisions made that influence you? We don't build a career in a vacuum. And so it's really important to understand the dynamics and what is influencing those decisions. Whether you're in a corporate arena or you have your own business, it's important not to stay so focused on your work that you don't see what's going on around you. On the other hand, you don't want to be so focused on what everybody else is doing
and not focus on the work.
And you're paralyzed, right?
Sure. So I consume so much audio content. And this is my process. So I read a physical book most mornings. I have a routine in the morning where I am always working my way through some typically nonfiction. I read fiction on vacation and trips and travel, and I read nonfiction for personal development when I just during the regular work week. And so I will be reading a book at any given point in time. I'm not really a read 5 books at one time kind of person. I do one at a time, just go straight through, assuming I like it and I finish it. So I do a book at a time that way. And then I have a 1-hour walk every day. So because I sit and teach and stand and teach so much, I do a lot of sitting. And in order to stay healthy and to have good habits coming out of COVID, I realized I've got to get out of the house. And and really take care of my body so that my body and my mind are well and last a long time. So I have an hour walk every morning, and not every morning. Sometimes I have quiet white space and I just let my mind wander. But a lot of times I use that to listen to videos and podcasts. And this is what happens to me every time I listen to a video or podcast. I'm not exaggerating. Every time I'm like 80% listening to what the speaker is saying as I'm walking. And then 20% of my mind is trying to apply what they're saying. So an example might be, if it's a marketing podcast, they're talking about launching a digital course. Well, even if I'm not about to launch a digital course, I'm thinking about the process of their funnel, or I'm thinking about how they answered people's questions, or I'm thinking about the secrets they share, how, what worked, and I'm applying it to something I have coming up. And invariably I have to stop, pause it, and then my staff all works remotely. We're in 4 different states in the US. So I have to jump on my voicemail app and I talk to my phone and I say, okay, team, here's what I want to do. And I get the message out there to the staff, and we talk about it later, but it's basically a placeholder for me to say, don't let me forget to come back and tell you about this thing. And so that's how I stay curious and how I learn. And I have podcasts. I listen to all the major sales podcasts. I shouldn't say all, there's a lot out there, but I listen to many of the major sales podcasts, but I listen to so many other kinds of podcasts too. And that's the other thing I would encourage for your listener, is that, like, one of my favorites is called, I've really been on a kick lately for Creative Conversations, which is put out by Fast Company. And they interview poets and actors and all kinds of creatives. And it's not about selling. But every time I listen, there's something I pull from it that seems to make sense to me about entrepreneurship. And so I think even crossing across industry really serves us, because it gives us more of those fresh ideas.
Yeah, I think there's lots of textbook definitions, but very simply, in my own words, I think diversity is about being able to have varied opinions, right? So like having a large range of opinions maybe at the table. Whereas inclusion is actually being able to bring all those opinions and to be in full voice. And a lot of my work, right, is really about not just getting, now my work in information and the work that I do in the book is not just about getting women of color promoted. But what I have found in my own research is that a lot of women of color, once they get to the seat, they're not really in full voice. They're not feeling powerful, because our definition of leadership, our definition of what we think we need to advance has been very narrowly defined. So I think my work in particular around inclusion is really, inclusion and belonging is very tied together. It's about really unpacking how we think of leadership. It's about really making space for different kinds of leaders, because again, I think we very narrowly define what the criteria is, what's important, and having more varied examples that we can lead in very different ways. And we're in a moment in the world, I believe, where we need leadership to really evolve and to be different. And we need many voices and a lot more, not just diversity, but a lot more ability to show up in different ways at the table if we're going to address some of the biggest problems we have on the planet.
I like to read a lot, and when I read, it spurs new ideas. So that's one way, and the other way, I like to put my phone down, and if I'm going for a walk, sometimes I'll listen to a podcast, but I find some of my better thinking is if I go for a walk on the beach and I just let my mind wander, I get ideas from doing so. So definitely reading and podcasts, but also then just putting devices away and just kind of walking and being in nature. I find great ideas come to me.
Beautiful.
And sometimes not so good ideas too, by the way, like lots of ideas.
Thank you for sharing.
Well, I have to say that I'm grateful for my cultural background, because one of the things that I was taught very young, a part of Jewish tradition is that we question everything. You know, now I drove my teachers crazy. They hated me. You know, I always had to sit in the corner because I'm like, well, I don't know. Maybe there's another way to look at this, you know. And they were the experts, so they didn't like my questioning. But I you know, it's a part of my, I mean, we had a value of learning and going to school and always questioning. Is this truth or not? Is there another thing that we've understood? So maybe the truth has changed. So I think that always questioning what's missing. If somebody were to argue with me, what would they say? You know, if I were wrong, what would I be wrong about? You know, so I question. It's the questioning that helps me to learn. You know, not just, you know, the reading of books and. Because a lot of times when you read or you read articles or social media, you're just looking to confirm what you know. You know, so I need, and that's what coaches do. I disrupt your thinking. So, you know, it's going to be a little uncomfortable in my coaching. My third book was The Discomfort Zone. And I wrote that for leaders. You know, like discomfort is a part of learning. That means we're letting go of what we knew, and that's uncomfortable. The brain doesn't like that. You know, and to open to what else is possible. So I help other people I disrupt their thinking and make them a little uncomfortable to open them up. But again, it's what I had learned, you know, that maybe I don't know what's the right way. And to question. So I think that's how we expand our learning, is to say, I don't know. What do you think? You know? And take in other ways of seeing things, and then you can go back to your own way, but at least question. Yeah. Question it. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think it's an example of what I noticed that was part of what it is that I wanted to write about in The Widest Net, my natural inclination with a lens on whatever is that part of my body of work that I'm building. So like in the days when I was doing Escape from Cubicle Nation, I'm always on the search for people who are the smartest, most interesting, that are doing, like, have really deep experts, that have interesting tools that I can be bringing to my clients or my audience, my readers. And through that pursuit, there really is this, for me, it's a natural interest of like being drawn to the work. Guy Kawasaki is another person who I've known for so many years, who I'm very proud now, you know, to call a friend, but was somebody who I still just admire so greatly for what he does. But like in the early days, my driving force was not, oh my gosh, he's famous, I should connect with him so that it opens up opportunities. It was that I love the way that he's talking about branding. That's so interesting. It makes me want to know him more. And so that's the way always that my connection with people starts out. And a lot of what I talk about in The Widest Net, the process that you have for taking the time to respectfully get to know somebody. The first time I met Dan, I loved his books from early on. Free Agent Nation in the early days was so inspirational. Work he did in the magazine Fast Company just felt revolutionary to me early on. And so I followed his work for a long time. I think there was a first time I might have met him at a live event, and like everybody else, I stood in a long line, and then I went, and when I was able to shake his hand, I shook his hand, smiled, you know, probably took a picture, you know, had him sign a book. But that was an example of a first point of connection. And then maybe a little bit later, I would put comments on something that he put on social media. And then, you know, later, maybe there was somebody I knew who knew him, or I might, you know, reach out through his website and send a message with some encouraging information. One of the things I've learned when people are famous, often for a reason, because they have an amazing body of work, but they also have many people coming at them, is actually something that Guy Kawasaki shared. He had been instrumental in really opening up my audience for my blog and Escape from Cubicle Nation. And I had written a post that I thought he might like. I didn't know him at all. I reached out to send him an email one night,
just saying, I love your work. I thought you might like this. He ended up sharing that the next day on his blog, and it went tremendously viral. And so we had fun through the week after that, like emailing, and I was telling him what was going on. And it was just, that was kind of a fun point of connection. Eventually, through really maybe about 18 months after that, is when I ended up getting a book deal for the book Escape from Cubicle Nation. So he and I were on a panel together at a conference at South by Southwest, which is in Austin, Texas. And he said the question of how do you catch the eye of somebody who's really an influencer? And he said, sometimes people think that I have the Midas touch because everything I touch turns to gold. He said they have it wrong. I only touch gold. And so what it meant for me, and what I really keep in mind, and as I, through the years, have gotten a bigger audience, and so in some cases there could be somebody trying to make a connection with me where I have many people coming, it is nothing to do with how long you've been in business or how many followers you have, where you are sincerely contributing something of value to your field, to the ecosystem, to your clients. By definition, your right partners, those that are also equals or just much more experienced equals, can be interested in your work when they really learn what it is that you're working on. And that is the point of connection, because otherwise it's just going to be a very unequal thing where you don't feel good as the person saying, please, famous influencer, would you build a relationship with me so it will build my platform? I mean, like, that doesn't feel good to them. It doesn't feel good to you. But if you see throughout the years that you're consistently working on things that are complementary, and that you're, generous with them. Whenever Guy has a book coming out, or Dan, I love their work. When I love the work and it connects with my audience, I will share about it. I will write about it, because we're each contributing something important to the field. And so that's probably the biggest thing I think for people, is to really take your time and have patience, but also to not hesitate to really be asking for sometimes like connections, like I had for Guy Kawasaki, or my current, really the last 15 years, I always talk about John Legend, the singer. I love John Legend. I love his work. I always talk about him. And little by little, I've been getting closer and closer to his team, and to, some potential ways to maybe finally connect. And what would be lovely was, would be eventually to do some work together. Wow. But have patience with the process. And I think balance, being very clear with who you're excited about and who you think is amazing, but to make sure that it's not just because they're famous or that they can do something for you. That's an example of that very transactional way of looking at something. And it doesn't feel good for the person you're reaching out to. And it is not empowering for you as well. Wow.
I think it's a lifelong journey. I can't say I know fully who I am today. I hope and I pray that today I'm a better version of myself than 14 years ago when I started my journey. And I hope that I will continue this journey, until, I leave the earth, right? So I think that the idea is to continue the journey. So embarking on it is a process, it's a journey. And so if you think of it as a destination, then you will fail, because once you get there, then what? Then you get there, then what, right? So I think the idea of understanding it's a process and a journey is really important. And then anyone can start today. You don't have to wait until you have all these achievements or all these things done. You can start today. And starting today is knowing who you, asking yourself questions about your purpose, why you do what you do, who do you want to be, what are your values? So those are the questions that I started to grapple with, and not in a superficial way, not in my values are collaboration, because together everyone is better. I mean, these are like values that we talk about in society, but many of us don't practice and live. So it's really about being super honest with yourself, and then getting people around you. The people around you know you really well. Yep. They will be very, very honest mirrors to you, and they will tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly if you are willing and have the humility to listen to the ugly.